My name is Gayle Sloan. I'm the CEO of the Waste Management and Resource Recovery Association of Australia. And it is my great pleasure to have you all here today for our webinar, the second of our three series on packaging EPRs in Europe, being held in partnership with Reloop. Before we kick off, I'd just like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the lands we're all on. And for me, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Again, just reiterating that we have a few tips for Zoom, but we're all pretty good at it by now, I'm sure. It's been a few years of Zoom life. Your video and sound are both off. We can't see you and we can't hear you. Fix your screen size by adjusting at the top of the window and clicking on the viewing options menu. Work out what works for you. And as I said before, please put your Q&A in the chat, in the Q&A section. Sorry, not the chat, not to confuse you. And I will ask Anna questions as we go through, at the end, but I will curate them. So don't touch them, Robbie. Remember, leave them alone. We are recording and we will send a copy of this back to anyone who is registered today. Before we kick off, I just want to say that I'm really grateful for Reloop for bringing this presentation to us and this concept. I think while some of us are aware or quite passionate about the fact that there's a lot of great work going on overseas that we could learn from, there's a great opportunity looking at what's happening with waste directives, generator responsibility and positive obligations on design to potentially bring that to Australia to really fast track our recovery rates from 63% to 80% by 2030. You know, we've seen market failure, lack of regulation really isn't getting us to where we need to go. So I'm really grateful for Rob at Reloop to introduce him to us, to his colleagues in Europe to run this session. So some of you weren't here last week, so I'm just going to hand over for a sec to Rob Kelman to say a few words about today's speaker and today's session. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Gayle. Yeah, look, same. Really appreciate having this fantastic platform. Reloop, small boutique organisation, and we do lots of different packaging policy initiatives. And the purpose of this series of webinars is really just to introduce, and if you didn't hear a couple of weeks ago the first time, Australian stakeholders as we approach federal regulation around packaging to sort of best practice, you know, coming out of Europe, of course, and initiatives like, you know, fees for producers, where those fees are utilised, and I'd like people to be in a position to be informed so that we can make really good submissions and have a really good, you know, scheme in Australia. So I'm just going to introduce Anna. Anna Larsson is my colleague. Anna is based in Sweden, and she's Director of Circular Economy for Reloop and a specialist in sustainable resource management and circular economy with broad experience in packaging policy and returning packaging materials into the circular economy, particularly out of the household sector. So we're going to be talking about all sorts of different packaging today. And so I will hand over to Anna.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. I will now share the presentation and try to make it full screen. Okay. Give me a second. I need to switch off another screen. Otherwise it will be very strange. So let's do that again.
We all have to excuse Anna. She hasn't had a coffee yet this morning because it's only 7 a.m. over there. So
exactly. Okay, that should be fine. Yeah, no, now I see only the one screen. Okay, great.
Perfect.
So before we go to the topic of today's webinar, which addresses bad experiences and some legal loopholes, I would like to touch upon what we discussed last time. As it was said. It is not maybe everyone that is here today that participated in the session 2 weeks ago. So we discussed extended producer responsibility as an element of circular economy strategy, one of key policy instruments, but not the only one. So we also discussed minimum recycled content, the mechanism that secures that there is demand for the recyclables in the market or from the market. We discussed recycling targets, European ones. We also addressed the new calculation method that was decided upon 2018 in the circular economy package, where not only calculation based on what was collected, but also calculation of the amount appointed for the recycling processes was important. Recycled content, as I mentioned, very important policy instrument to secure the demand. We discussed different types of practical implementation of extended producer responsibility from the perspective of framework. So there could be organizations in monopoly, like in France. You will hear about that from Reloop CEO soon, or organizations in competition that we deal with in Poland and Romania. We also discussed the impact of the collection type, if it is municipal, so responsibility of the municipalities, or if it is a dual collection system where producers have organizational and financial responsibility. And finally, we discussed the case Sweden, where I live. Very interesting, I think, as one of the oldest implemented extended producer responsibility scheme for the packaging waste. Currently undergoing the reform, government decided to shift the organizational responsibility of the producers towards purely financial. As of 1st of January this year, municipalities have responsibility for collection of packaging waste, and producers through the packaging recovery organizations and Ministry of Finance have to pay to those municipalities for the collection. And we also discussed the definitions. We discussed why EPR was developed as a concept. And maybe I will focus on extended producer responsibility as one of the most important definitions. So according to the European Union legislation, it is financial or organizational and financial responsibility of producers for packaging of products placed on market in post-consumer phase. We discussed the difference between fees and product fees. So fees, obviously the amount of financial means that producers and importers pay to recover organizations, producer responsibility organizations, and product fees that are penalties for not complying with the EPR obligations or not attaining the recycling, maybe in the future also reuse targets. And PRO, a term that we use very much in Europe, so producer responsibility organization, entity, usually private entity in Europe that fulfills the EPR obligations in the name of producers and importers. And now I will go to Romania, one of the two examples that I would like to discuss today. So in Romania, the PROs have been acting in competition. So approximately back 8 years ago, there were 10 PROs fulfilling the responsibility of the producers and importers. And according to the law, the fillers, so producers and importers, had possibility to either carry out the responsibility related to EPR individually, but naturally it was attached to a huge cost. They could also pay a product fee. So a fee, this is approximately 2 lei, is approximately €0.5 per kilo to the authorities if they did not want to do anything. Or they could act through the producer responsibility organizations, and the fee was approximately half of the Romanian currency per kilogram. And yeah, as you can imagine, without control and without proper law execution, what happened and what the result was that when the control finally came, and it was triggered by the infringement procedure from the European Union, it was disclosed that there are a lot of fake documents confirming fake collection and fake recycling of the packaging placed on the market. Until today, the lawsuits are ongoing, and the producer responsibility organizations and producers are accountable. In total, the authorities calculated that 54 million euro damage was part of the Romanian market. 7 out of 10 producer responsibility organizations were visibly guilty, so not fulfilling the extended producer responsibility obligations. As I mentioned, everything started with the infringement procedure from the European Union, followed by fiscal controls conducted by the Environmental Fund Administration. All producer responsibility organizations were controlled, and only 3 of them got out free of any accusations. And it was disclosed that a lot of reporting is based on fictitious quantities of packaging waste that had never been collected or recycled. And already in the beginning of this proceedings, 19 million euro fee and penalty was imposed on producers. On top of this, also producer recovery organizations started proceeding with the law change, resulting with the fact that not the PROs themselves, but the responsibility accountability would go directly to the companies. So of course there was a huge damage, public relation damage to the entities, business entities, and especially international companies, as one of the main producer responsibility organizations had 70% of the market, and majority of the producers linked to this organization were global companies. So that is the challenge with multiple pros, and also the lack of constant control and monitoring by the authorities. Now we will switch to example of Poland. Here the producer responsibility organization is even more generous to producers. As you could see, in Romania, at least producer responsibility organizations were responsible for collection, for collection and recycling, for proving the collected and recycled amounts. Whereas in Poland, the only responsibility is recycling, and this EPR is executed via so-called documents confirming recycling, which are in Polish called DPR, so similar systems to the UK's packaging recovery notes. Those DPRs are issued by a recycler upon request of producer, and in terms of the municipal household waste, packaging waste, also municipality or an entity executing the obligations, collecting or sorting in the name of municipality. There are 3 forms of these DPRs. So A form stays with a producer responsibility organization, or a producer that had requested this document. B form stays with a recycler, and C form is archived by regional authorities. So 16 regional authorities have to receive a copy, so the form C. The challenge is that documents are tradable, and still paper versions are in use. So there is no central system yet that would have full control of the DPRs issued. And naturally, before 2023, before we are soon approaching the very important year in European Union with very high collection targets imposed. So there is more motivation in the markets to collect packaging waste. But before that, and without controls of packaging recovery organizations, there are also over a dozen for packaging waste in Poland, without control of the recyclers. Of course, the situation led to the fact that the value of those documents confirming recycling was very low, because any entity could buy a printer, as it was joked about, printer and a computer, and produce such documents confirming recycling. So that translated into very low fees that producers and importers pay to their packaging recovery producer responsibility organizations. And you can maybe have a look here. This is the data, a little bit old, from 2019, but it shows very well where Poland was. This is the fee in euro per ton in terms of the cost covered through the extended producer responsibility. So here we can see for the plastic packaging, just €5 per ton of plastic packaging placed on market, whereas in Austria, exactly the same period, we could see that the obligation cost producers €630, in Cyprus around €100, Czech Republic €200. Then we have Germany, it was even over €1,000, and in the Baltic countries around €200 per ton. Right now, as I mentioned, because of the fact that the collection targets are approaching, and they are much more ambitious. For 2025, it will be 50% of the plastic packaging that will have to be collected from the market. Also, because of the fact that Polish authorities started controlling recyclers. So if indeed a recycler declaring himself to be a recycling entity has capacities and has right capacities for the right number of the documents confirming recycling DPRs. In addition, the fiscal controls were conducted, so the control of the invoices between entities. That led to the fact that documents confirming recycling DPRs have got much more valuable, so more expensive to purchase by producers or PROs. And now I would like to touch upon a very important directive and regulation in Waste Framework Directive. It is Article 8A. It is addressing the extended producer responsibility requirements or minimum requirements, because we have different situation in individual states in European Union, but European Union thought that would be necessary to to define the common denominator and minimum requirements for all extended producer responsibility schemes in European countries, and I will highlight some of them. So basically, it is essential to clearly define roles and responsibilities of the entities, set waste management targets, and ensure that there is a reporting system in place with the objective, naturally, to gather data. Also, one of the most important principles is equal treatment of producers regardless their origin or size. So this is mainly about importers, because importers were quite a significant group characterized with the free riding to the European markets. But of course, it is also related to the fact that bigger companies might have been treated with a special attention, and European Union clearly says that the fees and the responsibility should be imposed equally, regardless the size of the companies. Within the minimum EPR requirements, it's also important to address what costs, according to the European Union, should be covered by extended producer responsibility. So we can see its cost of separate collection, with its subsequent transport and treatment, including treatment necessary to meet union targets, naturally, and necessary costs to meet other targets if they are imposed. Here, European Union phrases the net cost principle. So we can read that this is cost to be paid by producers, taking into account the revenues from the reuse, from sales of secondary raw material, and from unclaimed deposit fees. So clearly, if a system is a municipal one, and municipality has responsibility for collection of the packaging waste, municipality like in France would sell this packaging waste, then this income from sales of recyclables should be included in the calculating of the fee for producers and importers. And naturally, when producers have their own organizational and financial responsibility, this principle will be embedded naturally. It is also important that producers and importers should cover the cost of providing adequate information, and this information, there is also another provision, should be available in public, which is not the case still in many countries. And very important, the cost of data gathering and reporting. Now, many countries battle with creating the IT systems and data collection schemes. They battle with the costs. Of course, it's costly to develop the infrastructure and to operate such systems. But according to the directive, such a cost has to be covered by producers and importers through the extended responsibility schemes. Last time we also talked about eco-modulation, and I showed you some examples of that. So now maybe it would be also important and informative to highlight this principle of eco-modulation as phrased in Article 8A in minimum EPR requirements. Here the provision says that in case of the collective fulfillment of EPR the fees should be modulated, and by taking into account their durability, repairability, reusability, and recyclability, and also from the perspective of presence of hazardous substances. Unfortunately, and again, the challenge with the multi pros, so the countries where there are pros active in competition, so many of them in the same market, addressing same producers. Of course, it's very difficult, and even Germany has the challenge to impose this modulation of fees, because at present, one producer that maybe would still like to put on the market packaging type that is not fully recyclable, he might be refused, or he might have some higher fees at one pro, but then he will simply go to another one. So it is a really challenging provision to really implement it, but so it will have to be the case in all European countries sooner or later. And of course, important issue of monitoring and enforcement, which is very much justified by the examples I gave of the multiple pros in competition, a lack of control leading to irregularities, and important provision addressing the need for independent body without vested interest of private companies. So regulator to be established in the member state where multiple organizations, multiple PROs are in a competition. Also a provision that many member states battle with, for example, Romania, not to mention Poland, that has not implemented any extended producer responsibility reform at all, and there are not even drafts in development process. And with this, I would like to say thank you, at least for the part related to the presentation, and we can discuss.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I think you overwhelmed everyone with information there. I guess I was thinking a few things that was going through my mind about the first few slides, Anna, on what not to do. And obviously the focus on just recycling as opposed to, I guess, holistic supply chain and obligation to take back. Was that what you were thinking? And it's kind of like a pay and throw without a lot of oversight. Like you've got to have that end to end. And those much more positive obligations on generators. Is that like talking about last week with that more systems thinking? Is that what good looks like?
Well, yeah, we discussed the challenges, and of course there is discussion if producer responsibility organizations could act as monopolists and have the only to be the only entity representing or fulfilling the EPR obligation in the name of producers, or if they should act in competition, because we should not lead to monopolistic situation. But after all, we are not then in a situation of economic circumstances leading to advantages related to the sales of product or sales of services, but EPR is a policy instrument to secure fulfillment of the obligation in the market, and that obligation is a cost. So I myself, of course, we need to accept for this ideological reasons the multiple pros, but as I could present, there are challenges with that because it will happen on the cost of the environment.
And we've also seen that in South Australia, because I guess, you know, Australia is not a blank slate, like, because we've had container deposit schemes and systems for quite a long time. And the South Australian original approach of multiple scheme operators potentially has highlighted some of those challenges of having the multiple operators and what occurs and having that transparency through the scheme. So, you know, we do have some experience around that. I do have a question about, and when they were prosecuted, the dodgy producers, so this is the Polish example, did it prompt the rogue operators to actually clean up their act?
It was in Romania, yeah. So
Romania.
the yes, the first institution that was involved was environmental fund administration, and later on even prosecutors were involved, as we could see on the slide. So because environmental institutions in Europe, of course, they do have power, they do have a lot of control and monitoring responsibilities, but after all, the responsible entity is the prosecutor's office. And as I mentioned, the claims went directly to the producers in Romania. In Poland, no producers until now have been penalized and even prosecuted in that way, as it happened in Romania. It was a big scandal and led to actually a bit of improvement in the system of extended producer responsibility.
But was it in part because the government didn't put in a solid enough framework, so it enabled, like, there was an opportunity to manipulate, right? Like, it highlights that if you, I guess, don't think it through or don't have the structures in place, it is going to get manipulated.
Yes, because as we mentioned also last time, what is extremely important element, I think it was one of the 4 that we highlighted. We talked about financing, we talked about how the system is organized in terms of framework, so if it is monopolistic or competition. We talked financing, we talked about the collection system, curbside, brink, municipal, dual. But then one of those 4 elements was actually the execution, because sometimes law is very good, but if there is no execution, there would always be found ways to, and loopholes in the system, and they will always be, like in Poland, the companies that will buy a printer and will buy a computer and start offering packaging recovery notes on the market. So of course this is criminal activity, that's true, but what is not controlled is kind of, as we can say, allowed, right? So it opens the door for irregularities.
Yeah, Helen's asked, because I guess Europe is kind of very similar to Australia in some ways, in the sense of we have a Commonwealth government that could be EU and the states do their independence approach to implement. Has the EU ever investigated the opportunity to provide a single point of entry for producers to meet obligations across the EU, to make it easier for producers to report data and pay fees rather than having to do an everyone individually?
That I don't know if this has been a consideration. However, there has been approach to have, but that happened on the private level, that entities were planning to establish, and there were such organizations, though not very successful, to fulfill the extended producer responsibility across all European countries. So they were like aggregated entities, but it looks that this has not really worked out. And in every country, there are individual producer responsibility organizations that need to be involved by producers and importers. Some may be, there are some cross-border pros in Europe, so that they function in a market when pros work in competition. So if they have a customer in one country and that customer would like to sell products as exporter to another one, then they can utilize the services of this pro, but that is not so. No, there is no pan-European organization in terms of EPR.
Dana's asked a good question then, and possibly this one goes back to your slide on the 2019 fees. Have any countries required producer fees to be set at a level to enable good quality recycling takes and a safe workplace, so they can be ensured, good quality recycling levels and a safe workplace to be ensured instead of a competitive race to the bottom? If so, what mechanism was used to set fees fairly? I don't think the intention of the schemes is a race to the bottom. I just think we're seeing that some, maybe due to the lack of framework, there's been a race to the bottom with what you showed, because some of those higher fees that thought about the scheme in totality would arguably achieve that first outcome of the better recovery rates, wouldn't it? And the better workplaces. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, and then we come to the issue of producers' financial responsibility and ultimate objective of the PRO to provide the service as cheap as possible, right? And I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if so Clarissa during the next webinar will be able to talk about that. I'm not sure if Citeo has, so the French monopolistic, or in practice monopolistic pro, has embedded the principle of safe working place. But what I can say already today is that those PROs that are active in monopolistic environment and are monopolists in the market have much better preconditions to impose fees and embed more principles. And we could see that through the example of Citeo, also through the example of the another kind of predominant PRO in Italy, when they have for many years been able to impose eco-modulation. So in France already today, and I think it's since 2 or 3 years back, so very, very leading position in Europe, there is a modulated fee based on the principle of recycled content. So if a producer can prove that he has packaging made of post-consumer waste, recycled made of post-consumer waste, then he pays significantly less EPR fee. So this is a very good question, and it goes also to other principles, not only safe working place, but either it has to be regulated centrally, at least at the level of the individual member state, or we need a very strong monopolistic producer responsibility organization brave enough to impose this obligation and embed these principles in calculating the fees for producers.
And the word monopolistic almost sounds negative, right? But I think we've learned from what we've seen. You know, what you've highlighted today is if you have more than one, though, it's not as strong. So when you set up a scheme and you have one pro, I don't think it's the same connotation saying it's a monopoly as a sort of market monopoly. Like, it's just being really clear there is one scheme pro because there is one scheme, right? So, monopolistic almost sounds quite emotive and negative, but we're actually just saying there's clarity here. We're very clear on the roles and responsibility of the pro, and there is only one doing it, I think, as opposed to saying they've built this monopoly power, which is almost an adverse thing, because that having that clarity of the one pro that is responsible in setting up the system is I think, we've seen in Australia with the CDS that is a better outcome, even though we've now got 7 pros because every state's got their own. But at least each state has one.
Yeah, it is discussed. So, for example, in the context of the future, I can't say upcoming, but maybe pessimistic, but future reform in Poland, there have been discussions related to the regional responsibility of PROs, because otherwise it's really meaningless. There are countries, and one of them is in Bulgaria, with a great example for cherry picking, right? When the producer responsibility organizations go to bigger cities and bigger municipalities and have their collection infrastructure placed there, whereas villages sometimes do not have a single bin for separate collection of packaging. So it really has to be secured that there is the clear geographical responsibility, and that could be a case that one pro per one state or one bigger region. And again, this is I think philosophical discussion, but a very important one. There is no situation of monopoly when you fulfill the extended producer responsibility or other environmental related responsibilities. Because we do not have a situation of selling the product or a service. We have a situation of taking care of the environment and being accountable for post-consumer phase of the products or packaging's life cycle. And again, if there should be many producer responsibility organizations, we have the situation like that in Europe, then clearly there is needed legislation, central legislation, setting the minimum requirements for those and imposing minimum fees, and then the competition can maybe happen between them. But all in all, of course, those that would like to keep the customers will focus on the cost efficiency.
Which leads me, Jana makes the point that you could potentially have strong rules and multiple pros. So that's what you were saying, Anna. Nick's asked, beyond the minimum requirements defined in the directives, and you were just talking about minimum directives, are there other important characteristics you'd point to leading to positive outcomes, which was part of last week's conversation. But, beyond minimum requirements, what else is required for success?
Yeah, we discussed in the broader context the role of extended producer responsibility as one of policy instruments, because essentially, and this is reflected through the definitions, it is financial responsibility of producers and importers. But it's not enough to only pay for collection and preparation for recycling. We need to have a broader context, and what is important and what we discussed last time is ambitious collection targets. Of course, it's we do not have a situation of fulfillment the responsibility as 30-40 years ago, when it was enough to collect 15-20. We do not have a situation as many decades ago with limited amount of waste placed on market. Now, as we mentioned, in Europe, we have almost 200 kilograms per capita in a year per European citizen. So the amounts are substantial, and we need to collect more. We also have the circularity. It's not enough to collect and produce, I don't know, fleece jacket from PET beverage containers. We need to provide the closed loop. In order to provide the closed loop, we need to have maximized collection. And as I also mentioned, what is extremely important is this mechanism of minimum recycled content, which secures that there is demand from the market for the post-consumer waste. Because we can collect, or municipalities, for example, in many countries, like in Poland, they still have responsibility to collect certain percentages of the packaging waste that is placed on market. Hopefully at some point they will have co-financing for that, but this will not be enough if there is no mechanism securing the demand from the market. So this minimum recycled content is extremely important to attain the target, as phrased, circular economy.
And you mentioned about collection targets and penalties. What were the penalties in Sweden in particular that were set for not hitting the collection targets, and how important are they for the scheme?
The collection targets were achieved. The problem was the recycling. So I can send to Robbie the
penalties that
the responsibilities, the fees that were relevant.
Were they? I'm assuming that the fact the penalties are there and they're financial, they act as hopefully a good disincentive.
Yeah.
We don't have penalties for much in Australia. Rob fought hard to get some in WA on not hitting the targets, but he keeps pointing out that they weren't very strong. All right. Anonymous asks, the recyclables recovered in mixed waste and curbside packaging from recovery facilities have the same quality and similar values. So I'm assuming that was in the slide you put up with the days. And do they have the same weight in the recovery rates? The recyclables recovered. So sometimes it's really hard to decipher what people are asking. The recyclables recovered.
I can try to answer, but I can also come back to the previous question and answer. So product fees. We highlighted that last time and also now. This is a penalty, and of course the objective of that is not that producers should pay it, but they should have this in front of their eyes as the alternative if they do not fulfill extended producer responsibility. And that also includes the situation when the collection targets are not attained. And naturally, the product fees will play a role if they are set in a significantly higher level than the fees that producers and importers anyway pay to the pro for fulfilling the EPR obligations. And as we could see in the example of Romania, it was 4 times as high as the minimum obligation that should have been paid to the pro. Mm-hmm. We also have an example from deposit systems in Europe now, when it costs approximately a few €100 to be part of the deposit scheme for example, for plastics, but the product fee would be €6,000. That is like in Slovakia now for not attaining the targets or not fulfilling the EPR obligation. So the objective is to have that and to be the part of the toolbox for the authorities in case. But of course, no one would like to just collect those fees from the producers. That is not the objective of those product fees. Yeah, and now to the discussion related to the treasures hidden in the residual waste fractions. Mm. So first issue related to the quality. Quality can be as good as from separate separate collection. In fact, in many countries, majority of the selectively collected packaging, for example, this fraction we can analyze, anyway goes to further separation processes. It happens that MRFs in Europe exactly the same MRF, exactly the same processing line receives 1 day in a week selectively collection packaging for further sorting, and then the rest days of the week mixed municipal waste for separation of the recyclables. And again, the quality can be as good. Actually, in one country which is associated to the European Union, so it is Norway, it has to fulfill the obligations related to the environmental legislation, waste directives included. 50% of the population does not even have separate collection of plastics, because then Norwegian municipalities concluded, okay, we don't have to put one more extra bin for plastic film after bread and yogurt containers, because people have their limitations. I mean, the maximum they achieved from the separate collection was 50% maximum in the very best case. Normally it's around 40 and below. So they said, okay, we ask people to place it in the bin together with the dry residuals. Of course, the food waste has already been separated, and we separated at the sorting line, and they achieved 90% separation, and out of which 2 years ago they were able to sell, so it was marketable 60% of what the input was. So concluding on that, the quality could be as good, and actually we need to reach out for the residual waste, or sorry, mixed waste fractions in order to achieve the targets, for example, for plastic packaging in Europe. Again, in some countries it's barely 30, best cases 40, 50%. So we have to reach out to this mixed waste fraction. And yes, and now the final issue: should the producers be responsible for that fraction as well? So payment of the payment for the plants. Of course, the discussion is ongoing, and it will be much more relevant as the targets are very high, and again, no one has achieved 50%, as we would need to do in 2025 for plastic packaging. Yeah, and then this philosophical discussion: should I, producer, be responsible for a consumer that has not fulfilled his obligation in terms of sorting, or should I also pay for this separation from mixed waste? And that would also, wake the discussions up with regards to the payment of the incineration and disposal, right? Because now everyone focuses on the separately collected recyclables. Okay, but what about post-consumer phase and incineration or other disposal through landfilling? Is it still under the EPR? Yeah, let's see.
And I think
That was-
people who missed that last week, we had a really good conversation on that, and Justine's going to get cranky at me. But if you weren't here last week and you want to see, well, not last week, last episode, contact the office and we will share it, because we went into that really, really well, I think, about the total cost of the scheme. And, you know, if it's outside the scheme, who covers it, and the incentives of moving into the recovery. And I think that was a great job, Anna. I'm going to use that as a segue to the last question. So in your opinion, and this harps back to the last session more than what not to do, but just your reflection on the ownership of the recovered material, you know, should that be with the pro? Should that be with the recycler? What works best as part of the scheme costs and managing the scheme? Who should own the material?
Yeah, so material ownership, that's also a very interesting question. We have a circularity approaching us as the objective. So this is a natural reaction of producers, and we can see it as trend in Europe to either continue ownership of the collection of the material, or maybe some of them would like to start organizational responsibility for the reason of the ownership of the substrates for the production of packaging on products based on recycled content. And as I mentioned, I think last time, there are already at least 3 countries in Europe with deposit system for beverage containers, when the system operator provides for solutions that make the material available to producers. So that was Sweden with this right of first refusal, followed by Norway, and then we have fair access in Slovakia, where the system operator makes available the certain proportion of the material collected to the producers. So that is within the deposit scheme and for beverage containers, and producers, yeah, indeed, are able to close the loop for plastic bottles and aluminium cans now also in Slovakia. So can to can and bottle to bottle is possible. Now with many more responsibilities imposed on the producers in terms of other waste fractions, not just plastic beverage containers. As I mentioned, it is a trend to try and secure the ownership. So in Sweden, as we discussed last time, the producers are owners of the materials, or our producer responsibility organizations are the owners of the materials that are collected. They pay the compensation for the collection to the municipalities, but they organize the transport, and the transport collects and picks up the material that belongs to PRO. In France, that will be the topic of your webinar in some weeks, municipalities are the owners. They can sell the material on the free market, and they receive compensation for the collection from the producers via their PRO, CTO, but they are free to do with the material what they want, and hence there is this provision that I placed on the slide today, saying that if this is the case, of course, it has to be taken into consideration that there are certain incomes from the sales of recyclables and sales of reusables in the market that should impact positively, so lower the producer's fees. And that's up to the discussion. What system will be better in future? Free market that will lead to development of the recycling capacities and provide for multiple recyclers that will be owner of the material and will be able to sell that in the market, so their position will be stronger. Or if we land in a situation when producers get the material. The question remains, which producers would get access? Will all producers have access to this collected material? Well, probably the bigger ones, yes, the global players. But what about thousands of small manufacturers? Will they have possibility opportunities and strength and time and money to have more comprehensive control through the value chain?
Correct me.
Interesting discussion. I'm also curious your opinion.
Well, I was going to ask, I don't think, and Rob, you might know the answer to this, I don't think anyone as yet has a full EPR and a full CDS scheme in operation yet, do they, in Europe? CDS is coming later over some EPR schemes. Is that right? Rob, are you speaking? Someone speaking?
I'm happy to answer it, but of course, most European states have both DRS and some form of EPR.
Okay.
There is a switch around the EPR and whether they're performing really well, but there's most Northern European states have a DRS scheme.
So they both have it. So, because the question in the chat was on roughly 30%, you mentioned, Anna, how much comes from CDS, from source separated, collected, and how much from residual municipal waste? I guess I was thinking, if there's both schemes in place, do they have one collection or two separate collection, and do they redeem through separate funding? How are they all quite different as to which pathway they take when you've got a CDS?
Yes. Yeah, so this situation is not solved yet in Europe. Again, it is the additional sorting is the case because it is an answer for higher collection targets to be achieved.
Yeah.
And now I got the idea that we could actually have an additional webinar.
I know, I was thinking the same. I want to know how that works.
Mixed, yes, mixed waste sorting, because actually we have a little bit of the strange situation in Europe. As I mentioned, Norway, 50% of the population in Norway has the system where separate plastic sorting is not necessary, because everything goes with residual waste dry fraction to the sorting plants, and at the level of the sorting plants they are able to separate 90% of what the input material is. But we had a conference on that topic of mixed waste sorting last year in Brussels, and they discussed, oh no, but this is not right, and how can you do it? We should educate the consumers to separate in separate bins, and this is extremely important. It is they destroy the idea of engagement of consumers. But the truth is, and as I said, in MERVs in Europe, they do receive in exactly the same MERV, exactly the same processing line, a fraction from separate collection that needs to needs to undergo the further sorting processes, because it is contaminated. And of course, also from the perspective of the separation of the polymers, it's inevitable, and no one has implemented, I guess, if I recall correctly, in Europe, a separate collection of different polymers. That would not be cost efficient. So the question now arises: okay, if you anyway do this separation, and if you know that the quality from this mixed waste sorting is so good, why not leaving plastic packaging? And there is even the discussion about the metal packaging in Norway in the residual waste fraction, and then separated at centrally. So that of course has also impact on the costs of the logistics, because naturally 4 bins to be collected every second week or every month from a single household, that will have a cost attached. So it will probably be we have actually calculation on that, and it's definitely the topic for the next webinar. And surprisingly, I will not say more, it might even be cheaper for the producers, cheaper for the extended producer responsibility to apply this solution to certain fractions of the packaging waste.
To have the mixed material and the separation at the sorting. Yeah, well, I love a good eddy current. Was my anyway. I'm going to draw one last question, Ron. It's 6:05. Anna, do you have any idea the average size of the MRFs? I'm assuming Ron means MRFs when he says mixed waste sorting plants. What sort of is the standard sort of capacity? Is it 100,000 tons, 200,000 tons, or are they kind of more bespoke 30,000 tons?
Yes, this is a good question, and actually in Europe we have had a principle, and not related to the organization of the MRFs and planning the capacity, but certain co-financing for development of municipal infrastructure was given if the population covered by a solution co-financed was at least 150,000 citizens. So it, in a way, this co-financing principles, mainly coming from the European Union, has steered the capacities, minimum capacities of the plants. Of course, if someone would like to build capacity for 20,000-30,000 of the mixed municipal waste, yeah, that's possible. But as I mentioned, 150,000-180,000 citizens was, so we have to divide that with 3 approximately, and we have this 60,000 minimum throughput mixed waste sorting, mixed waste for the MRF.
Okay, thanks, Anna. You were amazing again. Robbie, did you want to add anything before we wrap up? Considering we had no questions at 5:30, we did awesome to end up going through.
No, I'd just like to thank Anna, and maybe we should think about an MWS, mixed waste sorting, after this. But in 2 weeks' time, we've got Clariska Morawski who's doing the next session. So, hey, Anna, thanks very much for doing the last 2. Brilliant. Loved it. Great.
And the next one's actually focusing on France and how it intends to implement the EU packaging and waste directive and recovery packaging to its own scheme. So maybe that's starting to look at kind of where we're at with our packaging scheme coming and how we go about it. So there might be some great lessons learned. Juz has just chucked up some other WMRR events that are coming your way in face-to-face as well as online. This last webinar is on the 26th of March, which just happens to be the day before we're in Queensland with a breakfast for the minister. So make sure you get along to a WMRR event. Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, Anna. Thanks to all those people who joined us late on a Tuesday and were still asking questions to the death. Thanks, Dana. Thank you very much. Great to see you all, and we'll speak soon.